Death only ends one generation to mark the beginning of another. Death terminates an individual life, but not necessarily the family. For hours the Master discussed the application of these features of family life to the relations of man, the earth child, to God, the Paradise Father. And this was his conclusion. The entire relationship of a son to the Father I know in perfection, for all that you must attain of sonship in the eternal future, I have now already attained. The Son of Man is prepared to ascend to the right hand of the Father, so that in me is the way now open still wider for all of you to see God and, ere you have finished the glorious progression, to become perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. When the apostles heard these startling words, they recalled the pronouncements which John made at the time of Jesus' baptism, and they also vividly recalled this experience in connection with their preaching and teaching subsequent to the Master's death and resurrection. Jesus is a divine Son, one in the universal Father's full confidence. He had been with the Father and comprehended him fully. He had now lived his earth life to the full satisfaction of the Father, and this incarnation in the flesh had enabled him fully to comprehend man. Jesus was the perfection of man. He had attained just such perfection as all true believers are destined to attain in him and through him. Jesus revealed a God of perfection to man, and presented in himself the perfected Son of the realms to God. Although Jesus discoursed for several hours, Thomas was not yet satisfied, for he said, "But, Master, we do not find that the Father in heaven always deals kindly and mercifully with us. Many times we grievously suffer on earth, and not always are our prayers answered. Where do we fail to grasp the meaning of your teaching?" Jesus replied, "Thomas, Thomas, how long before you will acquire the ability to listen with the ear of the Spirit? How long will it be before you discern that this kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, and that my Father is also a spiritual being? Do you not understand that I am teaching you as spiritual children in the spirit family of heaven, of which the Father-head is an infinite and eternal spirit? Will you not allow me to use the earth family as an illustration of divine relationships, without so literally applying my teaching to material affairs? In your minds cannot you separate the spiritual realities of the kingdom from the material, social, economic, and political problems of the age? When I speak the language of the Spirit, why do you insist on translating my meaning into the language of the flesh, just because I presume to employ commonplace and literal relationships for purposes of illustration? My children, I implore that you cease to apply the teaching of the kingdom of the Spirit to the sordid affairs of slavery, poverty, houses, and lands, and to the material problems of human equity and justice. These temporal matters are the concern of men of this world, and while in a way they affect all men, you have been called to represent me in the world, even as I represent my Father. You are spiritual ambassadors of a spiritual kingdom, special representatives of the Spirit Father. By this time it should be possible for me to instruct you as full-grown men of the Spirit kingdom. Must I ever address you only as children? Will you never grow up in spirit perception? Nevertheless, I love you and will bear with you, even to the very end of our association in the flesh, and even then shall my Spirit go before you into all the world." 8. In southern Judea. By the end of April, the opposition to Jesus among the Pharisees and Sadducees had become so pronounced that the Master and his apostles decided to leave Jerusalem for a while, going south to work in Bethlehem and Hebron. The entire month of May was spent in doing personal work in these cities and among the people of the surrounding villages. No public preaching was done on this trip, only house-to-house visitation. A part of this time, while the apostles taught the gospel and ministered to the sick, Jesus and Abner spent at En-Gedi, visiting the Nazarite colony. John the Baptist had gone forth from this place, and Abner had been the head of this group. Many of the Nazarite brotherhood became believers in Jesus, but the majority of these ascetic and eccentric men refused to accept him as a teacher sent from heaven, because he did not teach fasting and other forms of self-denial. The people living in this region did not know that Jesus had been born in Bethlehem. They always supposed the Master had been born at Nazareth, as did the vast majority of his disciples, but the 12 knew the facts. This sojourn in the south of Judea was a restful and fruitful season of labor. Many souls were added to the kingdom. By the first days of June, the agitation against Jesus had so quieted down in Jerusalem that the Master and the apostles returned to instruct and comfort believers. Although Jesus and the apostles spent the entire month of June in or near Jerusalem, they did no public teaching during this period. They lived for the most part in tents, which they pitched in a shaded park or garden, known in that day as Gethsemane. This park was situated on the western slope of the Mount of Olives, not far from the brook Kidron. The Sabbath weekends they usually spent with Lazarus and his sisters at Bethany. Jesus entered within the walls of Jerusalem only a few times, but a large number of interested inquirers came out to Gethsemane to visit with him. One Friday evening, Nicodemus and one Joseph of Arimathea ventured out to see Jesus, but turned back through fear even after they were standing before the entrance to the Master's tent. And of course, they did not perceive that Jesus knew all about their doings. When the rulers of the Jews learned that Jesus had returned to Jerusalem, they prepared to arrest him. But when they observed that he did no public preaching, they concluded that he had become frightened by their previous agitation, and decided to allow him to carry on his teaching in this private manner, without further molestation. And thus affairs moved along quietly until the last days of June, when one Simon, a member of the Sanhedrin, publicly espoused the teachings of Jesus, after so declaring himself before the rulers of the Jews. Immediately a new agitation for Jesus' apprehension sprang up, and grew so strong that the Master decided to retire into the cities of Samaria and the Decapolis.